with answers and resolution comes some type of peace, and that's what we've tried to do for these families.
The opportunity to basically have a job where I travel the world scanning the coolest thing doesn't really get much better than that.
The long-held strategic priorities for the University of South Florida, a balance between student access, student success at the undergraduate and the graduate level, and research productivity.
Hello and welcome to University Beat. I'm Denise White. Governor Rick Scott has signed into law a bill to pay for the reburial of human remains. They were found in unidentified graves at the former Dozier School for Boys in Marianna. A team of USF researchers discovered the remains of 51 people at the one-time reform school, many more than were listed in official records. The USF team positively identified 7 of them, and for 14 more offered presumptive IDs. Dr. Erin Kimmerly led the university's investigators, and she joins us now. And Dr. Kimmerly, welcome to University Beat.
Hello, thank you.
First of all, bring us up to date on where you are now with the investigations at the Dozier School, the former Dozier School Reform School for Boys.
Well, we finished all of our field work and are just wrapping up the laboratory work. We've made many identifications. We have many more still unidentified, and we've resubmitted DNA in several cases to see if we couldn't get a viable sample. And other than that, we will be done very soon.
It's been difficult to identify all of the remains. Why?
In large part because we just haven't been able to find all of the families. We're talking about a couple of generations ago. Because these were children, they didn't have offspring, and so we're having to go back and find parents, aunts and uncles, cousins, siblings, and follow through maybe 2 or 3 generations where they are now. We also have the challenge of having to find relatives on the maternal side because of the type of DNA that preserves over time. And we've had a lot of success, with finding additional families, but just haven't been able to make all of the matches.
Let's go back to the beginning of your first involvement with this. How did you come to know about this school, and at what point did you decide you just had to get involved?
Probably like a lot of people, I read about it in the paper. Ben Montgomery had done a long series at that point called For Their Own Good in the Tampa Bay Times. And I had the opportunity to meet him after reading his articles, and Robert Straley, who was one of the original founders of the White House Boys, which was a survivors organization of men who had been sent to the school. And they had been doing, Robert had a book reading downtown, and so I attended that and started talking to them. I think probably like a lot of people when I first read it, I just thought, is this true, and how did this happen? And I've never heard of this before, and so I wanted to get more information and sort of understand it and see what it was about.
And how do you go about identifying remains?
So with every set of skeletal remains, there's all kinds of information that can be learned about a person. It's kind of the biological who you are, your age, whether you're male or female, how tall you are, what you eat, your nutrition. And so we put together all those variables that kind of paint a picture of who a person was, again, from the biology perspective, and then do a facial reconstruction, if there's clothing, artifacts, anything that kind of tells that story of who's this person, and put it out to the public. And that's what we did in this case too, is, not because somebody's going to recognize the picture from so long ago, but in trying to get families to come forward and finding the families of the missing. That's what is really key and essential. And once we do that, we can start to narrow down that list of who this person might be. We use DNA testing, where we test remains, bones or teeth from the unknown person to a sample from a family member. And if the match is there, then we can make a positive identification.
In the broadest definition, anthropology is the study of man, but forensic anthropology seems to deal with man or woman at their absolute worst. So talk about the toll that this has taken on you, this kind of work.
Well, I think that, early on in college, I'd say I always wanted to be an anthropologist, kind of toyed around with different types of anthropology. really became interested in forensic applications in college when I was doing work overseas in the Balkans, and just realized that science could be used in these justice issues and human rights issues. And so I think on a very professional level, I've always viewed it and approached it, I don't want to say as a job, but as a tool and a way to help people, what we call enforced human rights, right? There's human rights where you just monitor and report, and then there's something where you take action. And in this case, the action is returning remains to families, giving families knowledge and information that they otherwise don't have. Maybe that goes to court and someone's held accountable if there was a crime committed. And so I think it's very rewarding, even though it is dealing with death and tragedy. It's been very rewarding from that perspective. It can be hard at times, of course, especially when you're talking about crimes and violence against children. It's really hard to get your head around that and understand, you know, how that could happen. So many people knew, everyone looked away. There's all these ways that people can kind of justify it in their minds, I think, and that the state justified it over decades to allow it to continue. But I think, you know, what we have at the end of the day is hope, and that with answers and resolution comes some type of peace, and that's what we've tried to do for these families.
How has the recognition your work has received impacted the school?
Just in our department last year, we had over 40 graduate students apply to study forensic anthropology, and I think that was a record number of applicants specifically for that area.
In addition to being an associate professor, you're the scientific director of the Florida Institute for Forensic Anthropology and Applied Sciences. What does the Institute do?
We have a consortium of people who come together and work specifically on the issue of unidentified and missing persons. It's really about applying science to cold cases, and that can be defined pretty broadly into those categories, but we're really dedicated to finding the missing and helping identify those individuals. Florida has about 900 unidentified individuals, and there's more than 2,500 missing persons cases, and they date back to the 1960s. And so everything that we can do with new technologies, tools, and raising public awareness can help solve more of those cases.
Dr. Kimberly, thank you for being on University Beat. Good luck to you. Health officials have confirmed nearly 200 cases of the Zika virus in Florida. The often mosquito-transmitted disease can cause birth defects. Dr. Thomas Anash is chair of the Global Health Department in the USF College of Public Health. He says the lifestyle of most Floridians may keep down the number of Zika cases in our state.
We tend to live in air-conditioned houses. If we're out of doors, we're inside our lanais, which are generally screened out. We travel from place to place in air-conditioned cars and work in air-conditioned offices. We have a mosquito control program in Florida that is probably the most effective mosquito control program anywhere in the country. And all these factors, I think, when put together, really reduce the risks that we will get transmission of the Zika virus here in Florida via mosquitoes.
Anash says the type of mosquito which carries the Zika virus is known as the yellow fever mosquito. He says the species is rare in Florida, but says certain weather conditions could increase their numbers.
In cases where people have hot, dry weather, you would think that that would really cause the mosquito populations to drop down. But in general, what happens when you have hot, dry weather, people start to do things like store water in rain barrels outside of their houses, or they'll have a small swimming pool in the backyard for the dog to go into because it's hot and dry, or they'll have dog dishes of water out there that they don't empty very frequently, or they're watering their plants very frequently and not emptying the saucers. These create new breeding habitats for these mosquitoes and will actually increase the population of this particular species.
Anash says it's also possible to contract Zika through sexual contact with an infected person. Other USF researchers are applying revolutionary new technology to history. As Hedel Gandhi reports, they're using 3D printing to help preserve centuries-old artifacts.
It's almost like a scene from Indiana Jones.
Fewer guns, fewer Nazis, better toys.
toys, including 3D laser scanners, virtual reality goggles, and cameras with drones, all aimed at protecting the world's greatest historical treasures.
Everything from geographic information systems and remote sensing to the scanning in high detail of museum artifacts, some of which are 1 or 2 thousandths of a millimeter in resolution.
Dr. Herbert Machner is a professor of geosciences and anthropology at USF.
This is a hieroglyph, Mayan hieroglyphic.
He's also the executive director of the school's Center for Visualization and Applied Spatial Technologies, also known as CVAST.
The opportunity to basically have a job where I travel the world scanning the coolest things doesn't really get much better than that.
This footage is from an attack on a museum in Mosul in February 2015.
It shows ISIS using sledgehammers, bulldozers, and even explosives to target famous archaeological sites in the Middle East.
IS even filmed the event from multiple camera angles. We've never seen anything quite like this. Small artifacts are looted and sold to pay for ammunition. Large artifacts are destroyed publicly as they are deemed un-Islamic.
There were no replicas, no 3D images of these ancient artifacts, so CVAST teamed up with archaeologists in Europe to start Project Mosul.
They created this project in order to allow people to send in photographs of the most famous artifacts that were destroyed, and then we're using modern computer technologies to take those photographs and reconstruct the destroyed items in 3D.
That process, called photogrammetry, creates virtual replicas. They're not exact, but what if the team scanned historical items before they were ever destroyed?
We did this in about 3.5 days.
This year, the CVAST team did just that. They traveled to Leiden, Netherlands, and Paris, France, where they created this stunning 3D animation of the Natural Museum of History using this special camera.
It spins 180 degrees on the tripod, shoots a laser from the scanner off of a rotating mirror, and collects data, point data, on anything that it can see within that position.
We put all these data online with measurement tools and other kinds of methods of analysis so that any student anywhere in the world, or any scholar, or any politician, or anyone else can get online, do measurements, conduct their own analyses, and write their own papers.
So what you're looking at here is a point cloud animation of a baleen whale that we 3D laser scanned as part of our recent trip to Paris. But from here, it takes you through the belly of the whale, in essence, really.
The team also scanned this rare stellar sea cow. It was the only piece missing from Dr. Machner's extensive 3D online database of every single Arctic mammal, bird, and fish fossil in the world.
But it was basically a manatee that was 30 to 40 feet long and weighed 20,000 pounds. And we got to scan one of the only complete specimens in the world. And that was very exciting for us.
I would love to be able to grab them in VR and turn them around and look at them.
It's the future of 3D, visiting historical sites and museums through virtual reality.
So a vertebrae here and a rib there, and the skull. And
well, there's a big geek factor of this.
So.
Take a look at this 10th century monument that's located in a remote region of Armenia. Even if you were to visit it, you would never see this much detail. And that's why the models and the 3D imaging just gives you a little bit more of an up-close and personal look at history.
It could be a benefit for the visit to get a better understanding, but it will never replace the emotional effect that you have in the front of the real things. You know?
And while you can't replicate the experience, you can replicate this.
And it will show up on the screen what I'm scanning. So here I'm about to come into the eyes.
Thanks to 3D laser scanners and printers. Wow, you can really see it start to form there. That are literally changing the face of history.
The mere fact that UNESCO and the UN are pumping hundreds of millions of dollars a year into PhD programs in archaeology and history to do exactly this implies that it's not dead at all. And in fact, it's growing more rapidly than it ever has in the history of the discipline.
Technology that's making archaeology even sexier than it once was on the big screen.
Trust me.
For University Beat, I'm Hedel Gandhi.
The USF Board of Trustees recently approved a 5-year strategic plan for the school's athletic department. It includes the possibility of USF leaving the 3-year-old American Athletic Conference. Athletic Director Mark Harlan says USF is among several AAC members considering another league.
There's many schools in the American that are aspirational. There could be better homes for them if they make sense, but the key focus is really on the American Athletic Conference and getting us better.
Also included in the athletic plan is the possibility of an on-campus football stadium.
We've completed kind of a first round of feasibility of really looking into general costs. Now we have to dig in further and find out specific locations that would make sense, and then really dive in into what it would cost from a very specific point of view. How would you pay for those things? What kind of debt service would you entail? What would you need on the front to pay for all of that? And really decide, is it the best interest of our program and our university?
The plan calls for the possible addition of a 20th intercollegiate sport, women's crew, to be based out of USF Sarasota Manatee. Actor and social activist George Takei was a featured speaker on the Tampa campus during the spring semester. Takei played Mr. Sulu on the original Star Trek TV series in the 1960s and in subsequent movies. More recently, Takei has become widely followed on social media and an advocate for human rights. He urged his Sun Dome audience to pursue social justice. Takei spent part of his childhood in a World War II internment camp. He compared that struggle to today's fight for LGBT equality. Right now, there are 2 public universities in Florida that are designated preeminent by legislative standards, the University of Florida and Florida State. The designation means more state money for the schools. USF wants to join that elite group. Mark Schreiner has our story.
Even though it's 100 years younger than its counterparts in Gainesville and Tallahassee, USF is knocking on the door to join them as an elite school. The Florida Board of Governors, which oversees the state university system, has designated USF as an emerging preeminent university.
You know, it's a constant balance and one that aligns very nicely with the long-held strategic priorities for the University of South Florida, a balance between student access, student success at the undergraduate and the graduate level, and research productivity.
Being labeled as an emerging preeminent university has financial benefits for USF.
So in this legislative session, for instance, $10 million was appropriated to each of the preeminent institutions and $5 million each in new recurring funding for the emerging preeminent institutions that we fully intend to invest in a very focused and disciplined and strategic fashion.
But there are other advantages for both faculty and students.
Reputation that comes along with that is going to impact, I think, the gravitation of the most talented students and the most talented faculty members to the university, which in turn, of course, is likely to generate more high-impact research that is changing lives in the state of Florida and beyond.
The University of South Florida's efforts are getting other forms of attention from Tallahassee, as one of the state's most powerful lawmakers recently stopped by for a visit. Incoming Florida Senate President Joe Negron and other legislators came to the Tampa campus during a week-long tour of the 12 public universities in the state university system. They met students and entrepreneurial alumni who showed off research and products they developed through their education at USF.
I think laws and regulations will help this, just like in seatbelts. If we can one day make sure that this is built into every car seat, that way it's automatically available for everybody. You don't have to purchase it. It's automatically for free in each car seat, and we can save all the children's lives altogether.
Negron, who is slated to become Senate President in November, also sat down with USF officials to discuss his plans to increase spending for Florida's universities by $1 billion over the next 2 years. It's funding that USF would gratefully welcome.
We're very much committed to Senator Negron's vision. It aligns very, very well with the University of South Florida's plan or pathway to preeminence and continued growth.
For University Beat, I'm Mark Schreiner.
Starting this fall, there will be a new option for students on the Sarasota Manatee campus who are interested in engineering. They'll be able to take 2 years of pre-engineering classes and then transfer to the Tampa campus to complete their degree. In the past, engineering majors had to take all their classes in Tampa. The change is part of the Sarasota Manatee campus's plan to expand its offerings in what's known as STEM programs. STEM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math. There are very few classes about which students can say their exam was delicious. But that is the case at the USF Student Gardens, which offers a certificate in food studies. We caught up with some of the students and their professor at the Spring Harvest and Potluck event. Here, in their own words, is how it went.
Since it's Introduction to Food Studies, I'd like for them to develop an understanding through doing, through actually gardening, about how food is produced and the importance of our food systems. And having them plant and cultivate and take care of their own gardens for an entire semester gives them the experience that most of them otherwise don't have with actually cultivating and producing food.
A little bitty tomato.
So for instance, we don't use pesticides, we don't use herbicides. Students either use organic alternatives to that or they pick pests off with their fingers. And so this, I think, helps them better understand some of the practices worldwide that lead to the development of our food systems, so the production of food in other countries as well as in the United States.
I do eat a lot more vegetables, broccoli, spinach specifically. Those are, I guess, my go-tos. I eat a lot less meat now. Basically simple ingredients. The less ingredients, so if you can understand the ingredients, then it's probably good for you.
Before, I just kind of went to the supermarket and bought whatever. But now, now that we've learned so many things about the food industry and things like that, it's opened my eyes. So now I actually want to see what I'm purchasing.
This season they're growing tomatoes, which is actually our first season growing tomatoes for this class at the Botanical Gardens, and it's been very successful. Tomatoes can be difficult to grow, and so I warned them of that, and they have been vigilant in taking care of their tomato plants and the companion plants that accompany those plants. So for instance, cucumbers and onions and arugula and lettuce and carrots, all of the things that they'll be harvesting today.
It was exciting. It was very exciting. It popped up probably like last week, and then it just grew and it didn't stop.
From the day that we planted a lot of this, I was surprised to see how much lettuce we had, because we planted 3 and 6 came up. So we had a lot of lettuce. It was really nice seeing the plot get greener as time went on.
We'll process the veggies, which means we'll wash them off and give them a good rinse 3 times or so, and then the students will prepare them. And by prepare them, we mean just cutting them up and tossing them into a salad bowl.
Did you put the basil in yet? Not yet.
Honestly, how much you can actually produce by yourself without the need of GMOs or any other chemicals. You can just set up a plot of land and just plant seeds and water it your own, and they actually produce quite a lot of food.
A hands-on experience in the dirt. Well, first, many students have never actually planted anything before or harvested anything before. So for some students today, when they pull up their carrots, that's the first time they'll actually see a carrot come out of the ground in person. And based on their comments in the past, I think it significantly alters their understanding of their relationships to food. And so touching the dirt, cultivating the dirt, removing insects from plants gives them understanding of what it means to actually grow food and then consume that food, something that we don't have many opportunities to do today.
If you're a regular viewer of University Beat, first, thank you. And second, you may remember our interviews with Dr. Paul Sandberg and Joel Momberg. Sandberg is USF's Senior Vice President for Research, Innovation, and Economic Development. Momberg is CEO of the USF Foundation. But it seems the two of them are not just colleagues, they're bandmates. Joel Momberg says Dr. Sandberg started the group with some of the folks in the research park and later asked him to join. They played this week at the Flex House, the university's energy-efficient demonstration project. So what do you call a band featuring some of the university's best minds? Why, Brain Dead, of course. Rock on. If there's a story about the University of South Florida you'd like to see us cover, let us know. Our email address is ubeat@wusf.org. Our website is universitybeattv.org. And you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram by searching University Beat TV. That's University Beat for this week. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Denise White.